The immigration officer's mandibles clicked with barely concealed disgust as she reviewed Hassan's application. Her chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the sterile lights of the Kepler Station Processing Center, each segment of her Thrixian body reflecting bureaucratic contempt. "A marriage visa," she said, her translator rendering her pheromone speech into flat, mechanical English. To Matriarch Velkara. "You understand she's 340 cycles old?" Hassan kept his eyes forward, his worn jacket hanging loose on his thin frame. "Yes, ma'am. And you're what, 25 Earth years?" The officer's compound eyes seemed to examine every thread of his poverty. "This is transparently exploitative. The matriarch chose me," Hassan said quietly. "I didn't seek her out. That much was true." Velkara had found him in the slums of Earth's Mumbai district, where he'd been selling scavenged tech parts to off-world traders. She'd looked at him with those ancient, multifaceted eyes and made an offer. Marriage in exchange for citizenship on Thrixia Prime, access to their advanced medical care, education, and a stipend. All she wanted was companionship in her final cycles. It wasn't love. It was survival. 3 months later, Hassan stood in the dwelling module he now shared with his alien wife, staring at the diagnostic screen in disbelief. The symbols were Thrixian, but the universal pregnancy indicator was unmistakable. "Positive. That's impossible," he whispered. Velkara emerged from her rest chamber, her movements slower than they'd been when they first met. Her exoskeleton had dulled, and several segments showed the micro-fractures of age. She was, by all Thrixian standards, ancient and past her reproductive prime by 2 centuries. "What is impossible?" she asked, her irritation evident even through the translator. She'd been grumpy since the day he'd arrived, treating him like an unwelcome guest in her own home despite having invited him. Hassan turned the screen toward her. We're... Velkara's entire body went rigid. She scuttled forward with sudden speed that belied her age, her sensory antennae trembling as she examined the readout. The clicking sounds she made were too rapid for the translator, but Hassan understood shock when he heard it. "This cannot be," she finally said. "Cross-species breeding is impossible. Thrixian and human biology are incompatible. It was confirmed by the Council of Sciences themselves." "Apparently not," Hassan said, his mind racing. What did this mean? What would happen to them? To the child? Velkara sank onto her resting platform, her legs folding beneath her in a gesture Hassan had learned meant deep distress. "I am too old. My clutch-carrying days ended before your grandparents were born." Over the following weeks, the impossible pregnancy became the galaxy's most fascinating mystery. Scientists from a dozen species descended on their modest dwelling, requesting samples, scans, and interviews. Hassan found himself protecting Velkara from the intrusion, standing between her and the endless parade of researchers who saw her not as a person, but as a biological anomaly. "They want to study the offspring," Velkara said one evening, her translator conveying unusual vulnerability, to understand how human genetic material could possibly integrate with Thrixian egg structure. "They're not taking our child," Hassan said firmly. He surprised himself with the possessive pronoun, "our child." When had it become ours? Velkara's antennae swiveled toward him. "You would protect it?" "Protect me? Of course. Why?" The question held genuine confusion. "You married me for citizenship, for escape from poverty. This was a transaction." Hassan moved closer, sitting on the floor beside her platform. In 3 months, he'd learned to read her body language, to understand the subtle shifts in her pheromones that the translator couldn't capture. Right now, she was afraid. "Maybe it started that way," he admitted. "But you're not what I expected. You complain about everything, you're stubborn, and you hate morning cycles, but you also share your food even when I know you're hungry. You taught me to read Thrixian script. You tell me stories about the Thrixian homeworld that aren't in any database." "I am old and unpleasant," Velkara insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're my wife," Hassan said simply. The pregnancy progressed in ways that baffled xenobiologists. The developing life form within Velkara showed characteristics of both species, a calcified external structure like a Thrixian, but developing an internal skeletal system like a human. It shouldn't have been viable. Every model, every simulation predicted rejection or catastrophic developmental failure. But humans, as the galaxy was learning, had a peculiar biological trait that no other species possessed. adaptive genetic plasticity taken to an almost absurd degree. Human DNA didn't just mutate, it incorporated, adapted, and found solutions that mathematics said were impossible. Elsa arrived during a solar storm that disrupted half the station's systems. The medical team rushed to perform an emergency extraction as Velkara's body struggled with the impossible biology. Hassan held his wife's forelimb, feeling her ancient body tremble. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Please." When Elsa emerged, impossibly miraculously, the room fell silent. She was small, her body covered in delicate, translucent plates that shifted with iridescent colors. She had 6 limbs like her Thrixian mother, but her face held distinctly human features: soft skin, expressive eyes that saw in spectrums neither parent could imagine, and tiny fingers that gripped Hassan's thumb with surprising strength. She screamed with lungs that shouldn't exist in a partially chitinous body, and the sound was the most beautiful thing Hassan had ever heard. Velkara reached out with a trembling appendage, touching their daughter with a gentleness Hassan had never seen from her. "She's perfect," the old Thrixian whispered. "How is she perfect?" Dr. Sarantha, the Centaurian xenobiologist, wiped moisture from her optical membranes. "Because she's human," she said softly. "Humans don't know when to quit. Their biology doesn't accept impossibility. They adapt, they overcome, they hope." Weeks later, as Hassan watched Velkara carefully feed Elsa a nutrient solution they'd formulated specifically for her unique biology, he understood what humanity's real gift to the galaxy was. Not their technology, not their aggression or determination, but their stubborn refusal to accept that love had limits. He'd married an old, grumpy alien to escape poverty. But somehow, impossibly, he'd found a family instead, and across the galaxy, the scientific community was forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about biological compatibility, human determination, and the nature of life itself. Because if humans could make this work, what else might they achieve?